Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm in my, kind of lawyer's clothing today. I was telling before, Andre, that depending on which talks you see by me, I mean, I'm either like wearing a T-shirt or wearing like business, but I mean, this is also a really interesting metaphor of two worlds that are starting to, converge. The world of lawyers, the world of traditional law, and the world of, Web3 and software, right? So, and different tribes have the different, ways of dressing. And this is what we are seeing here today. As there is a part of the audience that is coming from the legal, industry, I'm going to make a short introduction to blockchain. I'm sure this is going to be really boring for a big part of you. And if you already know this, about blockchain, this is a really good way to explain blockchain to your grandmother. I mean, this is going to be very useful for you for that purpose. So, October 2008, middle of the subprime crisis, the financial crisis, Lehman Brothers going down, someone or some group of who knows what publishes a paper proposing a Bitcoin as a decentralized peer-to-peer currency, and this currency is based on a new technology that is called the blockchain. People typically explain blockchain with cryptography in mining, but I have like a better way to understand it more conceptually. That is with a mental trip to this island, which is in the Micronesia. It's in the middle of the Pacific Ocean between Australia and the Polynesia. In this place, you have these guys, this tribe called the Yaps. And the Yaps have these very big stones called ray stones as their currency. Instead of having like paper money like us or coins, they have these ray stones with this hole in the middle that looks like donuts. And they use this to make payments. Why do you think this has a hole in the middle? So they can help you take the stone from one place to the other. But of course, you can ask for help once or twice, but if you ask your friends to help you take the stones around every time, they will start like to charge you. So what the Yaps decided is to leave the rocks in the same place and starting to remember who actually owned each of the stones, right? So the problem is, how do you remember this? And the first thing they evaluated is to just choose a member of the tribe as the guy who would be in charge of remembering who owned the stones. But then they just saw that the solution was not good. Why do you think it was not good? He could forget, or he could die, or he could lie. He could be bribed. If he was like a very business savvy guy, he could say, you know what? I'm going to start charging you 10% every time you want to make a payment. Or if you don't pay me, then I will not tell you who owns the rocks, right? So since the Yaps didn't want to have this problem, they decided to decentralize the knowledge or of the database between all of the members of the tribe. So each of the members of the tribe had to remember who was the owner of each stone and all of the hands through which each stone had gone through since the moment it was, carved until the present moment, right? If Alice wanted to make a payment to Bob, then she would like gather all of the tribe in the central square of the island, and she would make an announcement and say, okay guys, the stone that is under the palm tree on the beach now is going to be transferred from Alice to Bob. And as everyone would see this announcement, they would mentally update the ledger, and now they would all know that the rock was transferred from Alice to Bob, right? And what if she wants to transfer the stone again to someone else? Well, everyone knows that she cannot do it because she doesn't own that rock anymore, right? So I mean, if you replace these little guys and their brains with computers, and if you replace the stones by digital assets, I mean, Bitcoin, then that's conceptually the main, underlying logic of the blockchain. It's a decentralized ledger that has an account of how many units of assets are in each account, and everyone every node in this network has a copy of the ledger. And if someone wants to make a payment to another person, then you have a private key that you can use to sign your transaction, and then you can announce to the rest of the network, okay, I'm going to transfer one asset from this account to that account, and since everyone sees this, the ledger gets updated, and this is basically how it works. So that's explaining blockchain to Grandma 101. So the important thing is that because of how it's built, this architecture, it's a very secure system. No one has hacked, a major blockchain, and there is no owner. I mean, no one owns the blockchain information. It's shared among everyone. So what means that this is like a public good. So, of course, first people became interested in blockchain because of all the financial applications. Bill Gates, for example, likes the fact that it can help make very cheap transactions. Why? Well, because it can help circumvent this very old system called SWIFT that nobody knew about it until like 15 days ago, but now everybody knows what SWIFT is. And it has been doing so much damage to people, especially from emerging economies, because making a payment to an emerging economy it costs you like 20% of your money, right? So this is very inefficient. And so the first thing that people think about when thinking about blockchain and Bitcoin is, of course, financials and payments and that. But we're not here to speak about finance. We're here to speak about law. And so let me introduce another concept that actually comes from before the blockchain, which is smart contracts. Smart contracts come from the 90s when this guy called Nick Szabo, he writes this paper where he makes a very, interesting observation. What he says in this paper is, so the world of the future is going to be more about e-commerce, digital transactions, real time, and still the human technology to make agreements is still based on like 15th century ideas. It's based on Gutenberg press, paper contracts, and what Nick Szabo argues is that it's going to be very hard for this new world, global e-commerce, digital economy to grow if it has, based on this very old contract technology. And so he proposes a new contracting technology he calls smart contracts. And the example he gives in his paper is something like this. You have like Alice and Bob who make an agreement. Alice wants to sell Bob her car, and they sign like a smart contract agreement. And then Bob makes the first payment for the first installment, and he, takes the car, goes, I can imagine he would go to Tijuca here, and then he makes, but someday he stops paying, and so what happens, the digital key that transfers his, that turns on the car stops working, and it gets transferred again to Alice, and so Alice recovers her car immediately, right? So she doesn't have to go to a judge, to a lawyer, she doesn't have to do anything, right? What should happen for Alice to recover her car in the traditional legal system? She has to show a paper saying property title, then she has to show the contract they had, and then she has to convince a judge that he didn't pay, right? And so how much would it cost to her, like doing this? Probably 2 or 3 cars, in time, money, lawyers, and all that, right? So the mind-blowing thing about smart contracts is that it can enable the execution of the agreement immediately and without like any delay, and almost at zero cost. which for legal systems is like some really mind-blowing idea. Okay, so that's smart contracts. And this was an abstract idea for a long time, for 20 years, until in 2014, this guy, that of course you already know, is Vitalik Buterin. He leads the development of a new blockchain that is similar to the Bitcoin blockchain in many respects. It's a network of computers that have a consensus on some database, but it has a more sophisticated programming language, and this programming language enables the development and deployment of smart contracts. So basically, almost everything that you could like write under the form of if X then Y, then can be written under the form of a smart contract and executed in one of these networks. So one, I know, simple example that everyone understands is like an insurance for a travel, I mean, for plane tickets. You know, if the plane leaves with a delay of more than 20 minutes, then the passenger is going to get a reimbursement of 20% of the ticket price, right? So this is amazing because this will happen without anyone making a claim to the company, without going to the regulator, without going to a lawyer, without going to anything. It just happens automatically, and it can automate a number of very, high volume processes in every industry almost. So this is the background that you need to understand in order to then understand what Kleros is and what Kleros is trying to do, which is a pioneering platform in the field of decentralized justice. So remember, Nick Szabo makes these predictions about the future of the economy, online, digital, all that, and this starts to materialize. Over the last 20 years, we have seen more and more people doing freelance work on online platforms, and we have seen also more and more finance, occurring in crowdsourcing, crowdfunding, and all of these new, ways to make finance in the digital world. A very typical case that could happen is Alice hires Bob in a digital platform, and then he has to make a video for her, and they make an agreement, and then he does the work, and let's say that she's not happy because she claims that the video he did is not good enough according to the contract. So there's a dispute which is by nature global. I mean, she's in France, he's in Guatemala, and maybe they don't even know who they are. I mean, they might not know the real identity of. They are just an avatar in a metaverse world, right? Of course, she's not going to go to court in Guatemala against an anonymous party, and she's not going to arbitration in a traditional setting in Paris for a $500 kind of dispute. So this is the reality of the world to which we are going. I mean, lots of smaller kind of claims that cannot be solved because of the lack of technology to do it, because traditional courts are based on jurisdictions. Arbitration is based on high value claims. So we have a very big blind spot that is impossible to cover with the existing technologies that we have now, right? So let's say now that they use Kleros. They make an agreement, so Alice will hire Bob to make this video. Instead of paying Bob directly, she's going to put the funds into a smart contract that is going to work as an escrow. And they both agree that in case there is a dispute, there's going to be an arbitrator that is called Kleros. If no dispute happens, so funds are released and the payment is done and everyone is happy. But if there is a dispute here, the funds that are in the smart contract will stay locked into the smart contract, and there's going to be an arbitrator, which is called Kleros, that is going to solve the claim. And what is Kleros? Well, Kleros is a DAO. You know what a DAO is? Yeah. So it's a decentralized organization that works following a number of rules set by code on the Ethereum blockchain, in this case. And what Kleros is going to do is it's going to select a number of jurors, right? Of people who are going to consider the evidence, and they're going to vote on who is right about the dispute that they have at hand, and each of them will vote independently. But I mean, before getting into how these people will vote, why do you think that Kleros needs to be built on blockchain? Why can't we build this on a centralized server, which would be much cheaper to do, by the way? Government jurisdictions? Maybe, but you could bypass jurisdictions with a centralized server, right, in the end. You may go to jail, but you can still... I think that Kleros is a mechanism to solve disputes. So parties, I mean, they need to really trust how this works, and they need to be sure that, first, nobody's going to tamper with the evidence, so that the evidence that is going to be shown to the jurors is going to be the real contract, the real product that was delivered, right? And second, that nobody can tamper with the jury selection. I mean, no one can put their friend or their brother in the jury, and that there is no like special key console access to make any changes to the platform, right? I mean, and when I say nobody, I mean nobody. I mean, I'm the founder, the people from the team here of Kleros, and nobody. We don't have any special access to Kleros, right? So this idea of a fully automated and decentralized platform is especially necessary to resolve disputes, because it tends to produce in the digital world what in the offline traditional legal world we used to call, rule of law, or due process, and this. So blockchain has this feature of producing like rule of law for the digital world, and this is why it's very important, and that's why Kleros could not be built without a blockchain. You could have a similar system, but it would not gain over time the trust from all of the parties to use it as a mechanism for solving disputes. So these jurors are selected and they vote, and then let's say they vote that Alice was right. So they say to the smart contract working as escrow, okay, reimburse Alice, and this is how the dispute ends, okay? So how are these guys selected, right? Who are these jurors and how are they picked? Let's say there is this woman, she lives in Vietnam, and she has a job as a video developer in a company, and then in the evening, on her time after work, she wants to make some money, and then, well, she can use her skills in video producing to solve disputes regarding video productions that happen on the internet. So to be a juror in Kleros, you don't need to show your ID, and you don't need to prove that you are an expert. You just need first to have this token that is called PNK. The name comes from Pinakion, comes from the ID token that ancient Greek used in order to be drawn as jurors in popular trials that they used to do in Athens. So this is like a lottery ticket that gives you the right to be drawn randomly as a juror in cases happening in Kleros. So Kleros has lots of courts specialized in different situations and different types of disputes. Let's say in this case, this woman will deposit the token into the video production court, and this where all of the video production claims go. So there's a bunch of people who deposit the token to be drawn, and let's say Kleros will randomly select 5 of these guys, and these are going to be the jurors that get the right to decide on this case. What is the question that you're asking yourselves now? How do you make sure that these people will make a good job, right? How do you make sure that they're not going to be bribed or like vote randomly? I mean, how do you make sure that the guy doesn't like just vote A, B, A, B without even looking at the evidence? And this is where the big innovation of Kleros comes, which is the use game theory in order to produce a set of incentives that will make this decentralized pool of jurors vote in an adequate way to resolve disputes. So this gentleman you see on the screen is Thomas Schelling. He was a Nobel Prize in Economics 2005. And he's a game theorist. who knows what game theory is? Game theory is a field of economics that is about how how people interact in situations of different assumptions about information, uncertainty, strategies, people trying to strategize on how to reach their goals. And there is a subfield of game theory called mechanism design that is very used to make auctions and how to structure auctioning mechanisms so people cannot abuse them. So all of this very complex discipline. By the way, we have William as our lead of research, so if you want to ask questions about game theory, this guy is the master brain behind all of Kleros game theory, so you can speak to him later. So, this guy Schelling is important because he developed, but he's important because of many things. One of them is because he was an advisor to the script of Dr. Strangelove. I don't know if you remember that movie. Dr. Strangelove script, he collaborated with that. You didn't know that. It's about, USA and USSR, the Cold War, and it was about how to strategize and nuclear strategy and all that. So, well, Thomas Schelling was one of the advisors of the script. Do watch that Stanley Kubrick movie. And so this idea of focal points is about how people coordinate with each other in situations where they cannot communicate or they cannot trust each other, but they still have to try to coordinate and reach a common decision. So very quick example, you have like 12 numbers here, and you have to, each of you independently have to choose one of these numbers, but you cannot communicate with others. And if you choose the one that the majority chooses, you are going to earn $20. If you choose a different one, you earn nothing. So in this situation, like empirically, people, which one would you choose? Right. Because you have seen previous videos where I already, no? Okay. So, yeah, because it looks more natural, right? So we think that the other will think that I will, that they will think that I will think, and then we kind of all converge into the same number because it looks different. Even if any of those 12 numbers would potentially be a good solution if we just agreed to coordinate there. So, in this case, the 1000 is then going to be the Schelling point for this example. If you take a bunch of people who are going to see the same evidence of the same case and are under the incentive to try to think how the rest is going to think, how the majority of the jurors that are going to adjudicate this case are going to think, then each of them will tend to converge to what is the truth about the case. Yeah, the truth about the video production, whether this video was done with the adequate quality according to the contract and according to the typical way of resolving, of doing videos in this community, right? So, the main hypothesis behind Kleros is that under this scenario of decision, where each of the jurors decide independently, looking at the same evidence and without communicating, they will tend to produce, as a collective, the right decision. But we'll let that sink into your brains. It's a bit more complicated because there are appeals and but the main logic is how this mechanism of game theory will have these guys make the right decision, even if they are anonymous. And remember that when they were drawn as jurors, they had to deposit a token in order to be drawn. So that token stays locked until the case ends, right? So if you vote incoherently with the rest, if you vote in the minority, that token, you lose it. And it goes to the people who voted in the majority. If you vote like the majority, then you recover your token, and then you get a fee of arbitration coming typically from the losing party of the dispute. What does this achieve? So, if you're a malicious user, let's say that you just vote randomly without even looking at the case, you will sometime be lucky and be on the right side of the majority and then earn some money. But on average, you will tend to be on the wrong side. And you're going to lose the token that you deposited, and then you put another one, and then you lose it again, and then you start losing the tokens until you run out of tokens and you exit the system. On the contrary, if you are, an honest juror, and you take the time to analyze the evidence and make the vote in the right way, then sometimes you might be on the wrong side because these are subjective situations, and not everyone agrees with every situation here, and there's interpretation matter and that. But on average, you are going to tend to be, more coherent than not, and then you're going to recover your token and earn some arbitration fee, right? So this is the main technology behind the Kleros approach to dispute resolution. The first feature of decentralized justice that we already reviewed is this idea of having the system built on blockchain. Why on blockchain? Because of rule of law. The second feature is the idea of collective intelligence, is having this idea of crowdsourced jurors being able to reach decisions which are going to be adequate for solving the cases that need to be solved. And the third main idea is the idea of using very different economic incentives to resolve the claims that happen. This have you seen? And this makes lawyers very uncomfortable, this game theory system. This is the third main feature of decentralized justice. So what are the use cases? Of course, lots of e-commerce type of situations where you have buyer against seller in an e-commerce platform, be it Web3 or Web2. Insurance. There is a claim between a company and a policyholder on, there was an accident, and who needs to pay for this? The policyholder or the company, and there are lots of different little claims regarding insurance, some of them not so little. Lots of situations of, user against utility company, user against, phone company or electricity company or whatever. Situations of, dispute happening in a rental or leasing contract. So last year, a judge in Mexico validated a ruling by Kleros in a case in Mexico on a leasing contract for an apartment, right? So this was a breakthrough moment for the movement of decentralized justice. A judge from a Mexican court in Guadalajara, there was a contract between two parties, and the contract said, okay, in case there is a dispute in this contract, use Kleros. Kleros, a dispute happened, Kleros was used, Kleros produced a decision. This decision was brought to a judge to ask him enforce this decision, and the judge accepted the Kleros ruling, and it was enforced. So now there's people in many countries trying to replicate the strategy that was done by a guy who did our fellowship program called Mauricio. He's an arbitrator from Mexico. And now there's people trying to do the same strategy in Spain, Guatemala, Honduras, Uruguay, France, and a few more. So if you want to experiment this in a court in Brazil, I would be really happy to partner with you to do something like this. This would be a landmark, historical moment in the Brazilian law. So you have also this type of cases. And then you have more, and this is where we start moving into the metaverse. E-gaming. You have people, esports. You have two teams and an esport tournament, and there is a claim that some team was cheating. How do you solve this? Are you going to go to court in some country or to arbitration, which you have like 20 people in an online game, which are anonymous because they only have their avatar, and they are in which countries. So there is no other way than solving this by some blockchain arbitration, and hopefully Kleros. And then if we move one step forward with this, the next step here is basically the metaverse. We spend most of our time in these online communities already, well, in our phones, but as soon as, Meta gets to do the Oculus better, or maybe they just put a chip into our brain. So we are just going to maybe live into these immersive experiences where, I mean, who cares what, state court says here? I mean, this is not even happening in the world. It's happening in, well, the metaverse or the cloud or whatever you want to call it. But this is where this is going, and how will you solve disputes in this world of avatars and of virtual reality? So we really need to rethink how this is being done. And this is also a bit explains why Kleros has this very special method for resolving claims. I mean, why doesn't Kleros work just with like a traditional ODR system? Because traditional ODR systems, they are basically like a trial over Zoom. I mean, you have a judge or a mediator or whatever, and then there is a claim, and then you send the evidence, and the guy makes a decision. Like, it's like a trial, a traditional trial, but with Zoom. So, of course, that's more efficient than, going to a real court, traveling and all that. But it's kind of 20–30% more efficient. The idea behind Kleros of the use of game theory is like rethinking from the first principles how the dispute resolution system works. It's a bit like Wikipedia did with rethinking an encyclopedia. Instead of just putting more writers, they say, okay, what if we allow the community to participate in writing the encyclopedia? And this results in not a 20 or 30% improvement in the cost. It's like a 10x improvement in how the system performs. Of course, allowing for Ethereum scalability and all of the things you already know. Those who come from the blockchain world, it's still expensive because of the blockchain costs are expensive. But if technology still evolves in the direction we think it's going to evolve, then it's going to be way, way cheaper, than what exists now. And so how this is going to evolve in the future? Like our thesis is that there is going to be like three main sectors of dispute resolution. For this, it's going to, for more objective and less complex disputes, for simpler type of claims, this is going to be solved probably by AI. AI, if fully automated, if you can use AI, it's going to always be cheaper than human having to do something. So that's fine. If you can use AI, that's good. But there's a number of claims that involve like human elements that AI simply is not very good at. For example, lots of situations of, let's say, a claim happening in a social media environment where some user accuses another user of making a racist remark or whatever other remark that is not allowed by terms and conditions. Machines are not very good for understanding humor, sarcasm, context, right? So lots of these situations that are still kind of small claims, but that they cannot be fully automated. So this is going to be probably a really good field for Kleros. And then we're going to see later how this also applies to NFTs. And then for types of claims that are more complex, that require some legal expertise, that require more interpretation, that involve multiple parties or more complex situations, that's still probably going to be solved by traditional ODR platforms. Of course, this is going to be online, but using an arbitrator and looking more like the traditional way of doing things and not like the Kleros approach. A very important use case of Kleros, decentralized compliance, as I call it. So we are in a world where you have very fast-growing, number of crypto assets that are being issued every day. New DeFi tokens, NFTs, etc. And the capacity of regulators to handle all this, it's still like quite limited because they have to analyze the token. I mean, it's hard. So we ask ourselves a question: how can we help the regulation of this space, but in a decentralized way? No, we don't want like big government coming and cracking down on crypto, but we want to self-regulate so we can protect consumers and have a more fair market where people can interact and contract with these digital assets. So we launched in 2019 this app called Tokens that is basically a way to have the community vet the tokens that are submitted to a list of tokens. And let's say this is how it works. So let's say that Alice wants her token listed into like Uniswap. Like, how does, I mean, Uniswap, how do they make sure that this is not a scam, right? They have basically one possibility that would be having their team like looking at the tokens and making sure that they are not scams. But that kind of kills the decentralization of the system. I mean, why? I mean, just go to Binance. I mean, they already do this, right? So let's say that we have this mechanism where she makes a submission of the token, and she has to fill a form and make a deposit, and then this token, this proposal of a token to be listed, is going to stay visible for a while, and everyone can check if this token complies or not with the guidelines to be listed, right? So let's say nobody has any complaint about this, any objection. So what happens is that the token is accepted into the list and now is listed, and she gets back the deposit that she made. And now let's think that she submits another token that is a scam token. She makes a deposit, and now let's say that the community, someone claims that this is a fake, this is a scam, so it can challenge her submission. And now we have a dispute between a submitter that says that, hey, this token is compliant, and the challenger who says this token is not compliant. So now they can both make their arguments and go to a trial. And can you guess where this trial is going to be done? Of course, it's going to be done in Kleros, and the jury is going to decide who is right about the case. So in this case, let's say the jury votes that she is wrong and the challenger is right. So he gets the deposit and she, well, loses the money. So this mechanism makes sure that the community will be checking all of the submissions in a decentralized way. So we don't have a single point of failure of a team that will make these decisions. We have the community making these decisions in a honest way, thanks to, well, clever crypto economic design. Let me show you one real case that we had here. So there was this project called Baer chain, and they made their submission. So the community starts to investigate, and then someone challenges this case. And what do they present as evidence? So apparently this project had some guy who was the CTO called Scott Bingley. And this guy, I mean, it was suspicious that this guy who was a CTO of an important project, like there were no like talks of the guy on YouTube. He had not been to any conference or whatever. So this was suspicious. And so in the resume, in the white paper, it said that this Scott Bingley had gone to a kind of Oxford blockchain research laboratories, something like that. So someone actually called Oxford and asked for Scott Bingley from the blockchain research laboratories. And they said, no, there's no Scott Bingley here, never heard of the guy, and there's no blockchain laboratories here. So this ended up like, people discovered that this was basically a fake profile. It was just a picture downloaded from a database of pictures, and everything was fake. And this project, well, of course, the token was removed. It was rejected. And then, you know what happened? Like 6 months later, or 8 months later, we read in the news, so that the police in China had made like a number of arrests in a project called Baer chain, which was a scam project. I mean, see how fast was Kleros in detecting that, and how long it took to traditional regulators, and how many people got scammed in the middle in these 8 months because Kleros was not doing the regulation for the Chinese government. It's not that we want that, but but you can see the difference between these crypto economic methods and traditional methods, and how Kleros can really help with this. And this is kind of what we see is going to become the future of regulation of crypto assets. There is this really good book by Gillian Hadfield. She's a professor at Toronto. And she has this idea that the existing regulation works now like this. You have like a regulator that is that regulates a number of companies, exchanges and everything. But we are in a world where things are more and more complex. And I mean, the regulator simply doesn't have the skills, the manpower to just regulate the millions of new tokens that are being made every day. So what she claims is that the regulation landscape is going to look like this. So there's going to be a super regulator, I don't know, the UN, World Bank, whatever, I don't know who that is, or the big DAO of the world, or the Ethereum governance, I don't know. And this like regulates a number of like more specialized regulators that are like licensed regulators, and these like regulate the projects that are actually there in a similar way to how the Kleros token app like regulated the projects that were making tokens. And Kleros can be one of the options, and then there's going to be competition, market competition between different regulators who are all authorized to regulate the So this is what we think the regulation of the crypto world will look like. Why? Because lots of the things, lots of the claims are going to happen in the metaverse. And the regulator, the traditional regulator, is not very good for regulating the metaverse, but it could like rely on approved, metaverse regulators to actually do this metaverse regulation. So this is what it's probably going to look like in the future, and this is where this world of lawyers and the Web3 builders, converge. So next time we don't bring our ties here, and no. So this is why we have at Kleros so much interest from two very different communities, right? Because it's this convergence of how regulation is going to work in a world that traditional methods are simply like not working anymore. And so what's going to happen, we think, is that with these new regulatory methods, there's going to be like an increase of the power to solve this type of claims. And this is going to happen, I think, quite soon. And us as an industry, as a blockchain industry, we actually want this self-regulation to happen. What we don't want is that governments start to regulate things that they don't understand very well. So we kind of need to be together in pushing for this type of two-tier regulatory approach. So I'm going to stop now. I'm just going to give you one more thing, and it's about if you want to learn more about Kleros, we have this great book that we are going to very soon make a new edition, an updated edition. But if you want to, a great way to start learning about Kleros, this is a great read. It's a big book, like 400 pages, but there's lots of new content to absorb. Final thoughts, and then we're going to speak about NFTs. For now, just an introduction to what Kleros is. Decentralized justice, which is this new field that Kleros is pioneering, is so made of three main ideas and three building blocks. First, blockchain, which makes sure that the system complies with a number of features for party to trust it. Rule of law, basically, everything happens exactly as it was written in the code, and no one can tamper with it. The idea of crowds and collective intelligence as a method for resolving the disputes, and the idea of having new economic systems and incentive of agents to produce the right results that we want to produce. This is what I wanted to tell you, so thank you very much, and open to questions if you have.